Okay, I'm going to talk about something totally different today because I was thinking about this a little bit while I was setting the camera up, and my thought was I'm going to talk about something controversial, but that's not even accurate. This isn't controversial. This is something I discovered by accident. This is something completely and absolutely different than anything I've ever run across before. And because this is me, and this is my show, and this is me asking for other people to try stuff, this is not me teaching you anything. This is about, hey guys, look what I found. If you're interested, try this. If you're uninterested, go engage in self-flagellation. It doesn't matter to me. I guess what I'm saying is when I say it doesn't matter to me, I'm asking, I'm not trying to pass on or to purport to be informative here. I'm just saying, hey, this is something that I screwed up a while back. Dyes are a passion of mine. I just did a video about get yourself a test long bore scope so that you can check for your gap space, which means the distance between the end of your case and the end of your chamber. Run that Teslong in from the muzzle and look at that point and say, hey, are my cases growing? But I'm a fitted die freak, and I've said that term before, but that doesn't really mean anything to most people. What that means is that I fire cases dozens, even, dare I say, 100 times. I fire cases a lot, and I try to set my dies up so that the case does not grow. Now, there's shooters, all the shooters out there who shoot a lot that haven't achieved this, just figure I'm full of it. And that's fine. That's why I'm a little defensive about it. That's why I'm saying, whatever. But if you want to try this, I've had dies made by every maker out there. I think a lot of Neil Jones dies. I can always get Neil's dies to do what I need. And I know I've promised to not use names for the most part, but I'm gonna throw out Neil Jones and John Whidden. Hopefully not throwing them under the bus, equating them with me and my methods. But John Whidden now sells a hardened die, and so far 7 maybe, some mine, some 2 different friends who I've built guns for and who are now building. One guy that I built a couple of guns for, who's now got his own lathe and doing his own. We've had good success with Whidden, always got a product that works. So I've used Hornady. In fact, while I'm talking, I'll pull up a Hornady die here and I'll show you what I don't like about the Hornady scenario. Just for instance, this is a completely custom die as built by Hornady, and I hate it. I despise it. Because even though the die does work, it's got this stupid hanging, I won't put a name to it, thing out the bottom. This is a big die. This is a die this size for a big cartridge case. And this thing is just an abortion. It'll cut your fingers off. I hate it. So this design of die is to me revolting and stupid. But it was a couple $100 and it does fit. And as I recall, at the time I had this done, I believe that's Hornady Custom Shop, and I believe it was a guy named Ben Searing, who, because he's in the public eye, I can throw his name out there. It's not like I'm attaching myself to a known gunsmith and him going, dude, I don't want anybody to know that you did, we worked together. So, that aside, I don't know if Ben's still there. He built a good die. I just don't like the design of the die. But I could go through, I look to the left and I see custom dies, custom dies, custom dies, custom dies. I'm a big believer in custom dies for one major reason. And that reason is that I need perfect die fit. Fellow on the internet from California calls it glove fit or hand to glove fit. And that's a good descriptor. I actually like that, and so I will use it. A glove fit, a shoe fit, a perfect fit. So the downside to fitted dies is I go through a lot of dies. I change chambers like I change diapers, and so I'm constantly ordering dies, and sometimes they're out 6 weeks, which sometimes turns into 6 months, which sometimes turns into, I feel the die maker wants to go on vacation, and I've waited a long time for dies at times. So I've developed a system, because I've got a lathe and because I've got several sets of action holding and cylinder holding fixtures with a double cat head or whatever you want to call it, double spider. I have an assembly where I can grip a die and then jack it around and find all of the salient measurements, and I can, and I do, and I have taken factory dies and recut them. And to do that, I'm going to draw pictures again. Here is the factory die. As best as I can do. Now what I do is widen it on this dimension. I shouldn't, well, with the WSM I didn't need to widen it. In many cases when I design a cartridge, I widen the shoulder dimension to bring the body taper into less an extreme. Body taper is that thing that makes a cartridge look like this. This is body taper. I believe that should only be about 10 thou per inch. So, I do two things with cases when I design them. I blow them out to 10 TPI, and then I leave the back end a little wide, but let's not get into that. So let's just say that when I blow out a case, like if you take a 22-250 case and improve it, Parker O. Ackley claims that the Ackley improved 22-250 offers the greatest gain over its parent, and that's essentially true, because the 22-250 case sits here like this. When P.O. Ackley gets done with it, it's popped out and it's got a 40. So I argue with the 40. I do not use the 40. I use a 35 degree because I believe that a 40 degree shoulder tends to bounce. When I try to size it, it tends to bounce, and it continues to bind up right here because this shoulder springs back and it bounces. My belief. That's why I quit with the 243 Ackley. So that's how I form my chambers. Now, when I go to order a die, and when you go to order a die, when anybody goes to order a die, you fire a case until it's tight in the chamber. Fire it, load it, fire it, load it, fire it, load it. A series of 3 to 5 until you get something that's, oh, you're heeling it closed, you're pinching it closed, you're thumbing it closed. Anyway, you got to grab the handle and it's like, ooh, okay. Now we're starting to get tight. We fit perfectly. You send those off to your die maker with a description, and he will send you back a die that should be just, see, in my case, I go a half a thou up here. Or, well, I'm looking for a half a thou up here. So I go a thou up here and 2 thou in the back. But I've tried a thou and a half. I've tried, some guys like to go parallel taper, some guys this, some guys that. Sometimes it's best, unless you're really used to it, to leave it up to the die maker, because I've argued with a lot of die makers. I have my own thoughts based on brand of brass, sizes. I'm not going to share those with you. But suffice it to say that a fitted die is absolutely required for good brass life. In the video just prior to this, in my life, I don't know when you're going to see it or if you're going to ever see it, I talk about using a test-long bore scope to come in and check something called the gap space, which is that spot at the end of the chamber where the end of your case, if you let the case grow, if you load it over and over and it grows, it will start to bind right here, and you will get pressure anomalies first that aren't dangerous, but then it will grow worse and worse, and all of a sudden you can run pressures up to where you're destroying your brass. So the idea with truly well-fitted dies is to not let the case roll up and keep getting longer. Basically, if that case is getting longer when you run it through the die, that means one thing. That means it's extruding the die like squeezing toothpaste out of a tube. That means you're running the case up into the die far enough, or pushing the shoulder back is the common term. But you're basically pushing the die up in, and it rolls around that shoulder and out, and the neck gets longer and longer, and it starts to bind up in this gap space. So you've got to trim them. That's called trimming necks. A properly fitted die that barely touches the sides, doop, and just stops against the shoulder and collapses the case walls. And you'll have to trust me on this, because there's not one of you watching this, and you will never find another man on the planet that will agree with me until they've tried it. But I have cases that are fired 50 times at super high pressure that I'm still using in matches. Fact. That have never been trimmed. And I'll bring them to a match and show you. If you're a match guy, I will see you sometime. If you're a West Coast match shooter, I can assure you that it is true. So, but getting these dies is hard. So, because I have the lathe, and I figured, well, I'm going to play with taking, in the case of my WSM, my first WSM reamer, I called Redding, and I said, hey, would you mind going out to your shop, take a case with you, take all the dies. He said, we have 7 dies in here right now. No, I didn't call. I called Redding, or I called a supplier. It might not have been Redding. It might have been Bruno or somebody who, let me back up. I called a supplier who had multiple dies, Redding dies on the shelf. And they went out and they popped them open, and they took the butt end of a case and they ran it in and they marked with their thumb. They did this, and they found the tightest one. And then they found the loosest one. And then they called me. And there was a little difference between them. So I said, give me the loosest one, but don't send it to me. Send it right to David Kiff. Send it right to Pacific Precision Grinding, or Pacific Tool and Gauge, or Pacific Precision Tool and Gauge Grinding, or whatever PPTGPVG Dave Kiff calls himself. So they did that. A few months, weeks later, I get a die in the mail. And a little bit behind that, I get a reamer in the mail, and the reamer and the die match perfectly. The problem is that factory die is, to this day, too small at the butt. When these cases season in and start to take a little bit of set around here, they do pop out a little before the primers get loose. The case head grows a couple thou. They start to click. I hate to click. I don't live with I eliminate the click me. So my next generation of 300 WSM, I went a little wider. By now I'm on the 4th generation of WSM, and this one is called the Matson number 2, I believe. Anyway, it's fatter here, but it still is really close to it. I left the shoulder alone. I didn't really bump this out, maybe a thou or two. So in the end, this is still a factory, one of the very few factory type cases that I have. So I took my double cat head action truing jig assembly, which I'm not telling you the true actions because I think that's silly, but obviously I had to do it, I have to try it, I have to whatever. And I can stick a die in there with aluminum surrounds on it so that it doesn't collapse, and I can run in here with a tool bit. And I used a tool bit with a cutter shaped like this. If memory serves, it was something like this. And I ran it in here so that that cutter, that triangular cutter bit, bottomed out right here. I set these tapers, which any machinist can do. And I ran this down and I machined out the die. I changed the taper, but inadvertently, in my haste, I got this corner bumped a little too far forward. So here's the die. I'm going to blow this up, of course. But I ended up with a die that is shaped like this, and then it's got a little of this before the shoulder takes off. That's wildly exaggerated, but, and it's a little more, and it's only about a thou. I built a little notch right here at the corner where the cutter bit ran in just a fuzz too far. And I think I can show you that on the camera. I think. So I'm going to hit manual on this thing. The clicking will stop. That'll be nice. And let me see if I can get this in. Here's what a fired case looks like. And these, my chambers are cut with, I cut them with the reamer and I'm done. I don't do anything else. So that's the shoulder on a fired case that has been sized in another die, not in the die that I made. This is what the sizing looks like. This is a recently sized case in the die that I made and modified, and you can see that ring around the shoulder. And this is one that has been, this is what the ring looks like after the case has been fired. And I'm working hard to see if I can get the light on it just right. Lighting is hard, guys. If you're a photographer, you'll know that. So here are the three cases side by side. Maybe I can get the light on all of them. And what we have is the three different iterations. I'm having trouble getting the ring. I'm having trouble. But trust me, there's a ring that you can pick at. You can feel the ring. Let me grab another one and see. That one seems to have a very, this one's been fired again. Very visible there. I think I got it. I think I got something you can use there. And sorry about going to the top of the camera. That's where the light seems to work the best. I'm not a photographer, people. So, somewhere in here, though, you are going to see the remnants of a ring. That's the ring after it's been fired and hammered. And it does this over and over. This case, I would venture to say, has been fired 5 times. And what that is this little bubble here. Now I'm going to run it out and see if I can get back a focus that's useful down here. I think I can. I think I can. It sure looks good. So what that is when that cutter bit left that little bump right there at the corner, little divot, a little, what would I call it? It's just a little, you can see the ring there. The radius of the cutter bit fairly closely approximated this radius, but not exactly. It cut in there. And what it's done, the die works so well, it's unbelievable. It runs up in there and it's like it forms a step that you can't even feel. You can't see it visually, but it acts as a little locking means, and it collapses that sidewall, and I can shoot this case over and over and over. Now, I haven't fired one of these 50 times or 80 times or 100 times yet, so I don't know. Maybe that's working right there, but I don't think so. It leaves an artifact, it leaves a ring, but I think it just acts to, this case runs up in, hooks on that little ring, and I haven't tried yet to overset the die and try push it up through. Try to jam it up through like extruding the toothpaste and get it to go. I'm sure that it would, but it would probably leave a, I don't know. I'm just saying, if somebody out there decides to modify their own dies and you don't mind wasting I don't know what they are now. I buy Redding S dyes, and they're, if I recall, they're 60 or 70 bucks a piece. So wasting them is not a light concept, but I think last time I ordered, I bought 6 Redding S type. I think they're called S type. They're a full-length sizing die with a button. And they're as good as any other die. You know, the idea that dyes are good or bad is stupid. How are you going to cut a die out of round? I mean, dyes that work are dyes that fit your situation. Period. I don't care what brand it is. I don't care how many hose bags come on the tube and say, well, yeah, but Forester will allow me to load 6 times, and Redding will allow me to load 8 times, and RCBS will wreck my brass in 3 times, and then as though they know something. No. Sorry, people. An RCBS die that fits your gun better than any of the other brands will load just as well or better. There's an argument to be made for one-piece dies, no buttons, no bushings. We'll maybe go through all this. But the point I'm trying to make is the fit of the die is what matters. And that's the only thing that matters. Unless a die has been honed on by hand and hand-fitted somehow with sandpaper or something, it essentially can't be eccentric. Now, dies vary in size by a tremendous parameter, 4 or 5 thousandths, just like chambers vary, 6 or 8 thousandths. I had at last count 13 300 WSM dies. And of the factory ones, I go through them, and when I'm reloading for various factory chambers sometimes for people who hunt, I have them marked. There's a die in there that's marked with 2 different clients whose guns, and one of the clients has 3 different guns, a Kimber and a Remington and a Winchester, and I've got 3 different dies set up for him when I do, and it's as close as possible to being right so that his brass is going to last him 5 or 6 reloads. But it's just because I ignore brand name. Brand name is completely meaningless, completely immaterial, completely irrelevant. It's all about fit. And in this case, I buy Redding S dies, I run a cutter butt up in there, and I pull her back out, and they're shiny inside, and they work perfectly. But this little artifact right here, it was a screw up, and I decided, I'm going to try it. And it's turned into a feature, not a screw up. I'm going to probably try to do it again on a die one day. Does leave a little funky ring, but the die works perfectly.